Hello and welcome to the SEC Breakdown. This is our new weekly college football show. I'm Blake Toppmeyer with the Knoxville News Sentinel. Cover the Tennessee Vols, and let's meet our other panelists this week.
I'm Josh Vitale. I cover the Auburn Tigers for the Montgomery Advertiser.
I'm Marc Weiszer. I cover the Georgia Bulldogs for the Athens Banner-Herald.
And I'm Horka, and I cover the Mississippi State Bulldogs for the Jackson Clarion-Ledger.
Hey guys, let's get into it. Week one games. We were all at a different game on Saturday. I was at Tennessee's game at South Carolina. There was about 15,000 fans there. What was the scene at the stadiums around the conference where you guys were?
I was home at Auburn's Jordan-Hare Stadium, and there were moments where it felt like it was supposed to feel. There were only about 18,000 fans, I think, maybe a little less, most students. And they got loud at times, especially during the opening intros, big plays. But there were also moments where it felt like they were kind of tired of being the only ones that had to carry the energy for a whole stadium. There were moments early in the fourth quarter when it was a 2-point game where it was like deathly quiet in there. So it was, sometimes it felt normal, but a lot of times it did feel very different. Like there's definitely something missing here.
Yeah, I was at Arkansas, made the long road trip to Razorback Stadium, and I was surprised. It felt, outside the stadium, it didn't have much vibe. There was no traffic really, no tailgating. There were signs basically saying if you have any of these COVID symptoms, that you should probably not be coming to the game. But inside, the band was socially distanced, spread out, and they were making a lot of noise. There was artificial crowd noise that was piped in, and the Georgia players said this week that it felt, more like a real game than they anticipated. And it'll be interesting to see at Georgia. They're expecting about 21,000 on Saturday against Auburn. What that's going to be like. They're going to be able to have their light show for a night game, and but it'll totally be, you're going from 92,000 plus to 21,000. It's got to have a different vibe.
Yeah, I was at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge for Mississippi State versus LSU, and they announced a crowd of just over 21,000. But I'm curious to see how many of those were actually students, because you look throughout the stadium and you saw your pockets of fans like you do at most of these college football games that have been played so far. But, traditionally the students are there. I think that's in the north end zone of Tiger Stadium, and it was completely empty. There were definitely more cardboard cutouts in that area of the stadium than there were fans. And there were a couple times where Mississippi State definitely lost the field position battle in that game, and they were kind of hemmed in that end zone. And it would have made such a huge difference if so many LSU students were there to distract KJ Costello and the Mississippi State offense. But as we know, that wasn't the case, and KJ Costello ends up setting an SEC record for passing yards in a game with 623. So I think the crowd definitely played a factor. Did it make a 10-point difference? Who knows? That's only a couple possessions, and LSU could have benefited from having those fans in there, but it was definitely nothing like the normal Death Valley that we usually see every Saturday.
Tyler, your game was probably the biggest takeaway from week one of the SEC, and Mike Leach's debut going so well in that victory over LSU. What were your impressions from Mississippi State in that game?
I think in the early weeks of any college football season, we don't really know what some teams have, and we don't know if the rankings are appropriate. Based on what I saw, I don't think LSU is the top 5 team in the country based on what coaches and Associated Press poll voters saw. Obviously, they dropped them around 20. I think Mississippi State is, a top 20, top 15 team based on what I saw, though. The offense looked good. The offense looked like Mike Leach's air raid offense from Washington State and Texas Tech, throwing the ball around, getting first downs at will, really. It was 7-yard slant, 7-yard slant, take a shot downfield, take a shot over the middle. So the offense looked good, but I was really more impressed with the defense. And I know that's weird saying that after the record that Mississippi State set, but 7 sacks also led the SEC. Miles Brennan was under duress for most of the game. There were big questions in the Mississippi State secondary, but a lot of those sacks were coverage sacks. The inexperienced guys on the back end were doing their job and keeping LSU's talented wide receivers in front of them. Obviously, LSU lost a lot of really good receivers, and that also played a difference. But overall, Mississippi State played a pretty complete ball game, and that's what you need to do to defeat the defending national champs on their own field.
Marc, I was I was in the press box in South Carolina, kind of following along with the Georgia score, just thinking, what's going on with Georgia here? So, what was going on with Georgia, and was it just a sluggish Week 1 game, or something to be concerned with going forward with Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have a bit of concern on what you saw in the first half. Obviously, the second half, they picked it up, that they steamrolled Arkansas. They depending on what point spread you follow, they either got there or close to covering. You have a new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. You have no Jake Fromm. DeJuan Mathis gets his first college snaps starting in a road game, albeit with limited attendance. And you have 2 or 3 offensive starters back from last season with an overhauled offensive line. And there were so many penalties. There were double digits in the first half alone, and that took Georgia out of their rhythm. Trey Hill had some issues snapping the ball with Mathis, and that affected the running game as well in terms of the timing on handoffs, and a couple of botched snaps where the ball got past Mathis, and then later in the second half, same thing with Stetson Bennett. But, Kirby was pretty quick to pull the trigger after 5 series, bringing in Stetson Bennett, and we didn't know who the backup quarterback would be. We figured DeJuan Mathis would be the starter, but JT Daniels wasn't cleared to play in this game, so you had Stetson Bennett, who left Georgia as a walk-on quarterback, went to junior college in Mississippi, came back last year as a scholarship, backed up. Jake Fromm didn't really play any significant snaps in really meaningful moments, and now he rallies your team on the road, and now probably is in pretty good position to start this week. But certainly the running game was not what Georgia expected. They didn't get the push for Zamir White, for Kenny McIntosh, for James Cook, and that's got to be an area where they need to get better. Georgia's wanting to open up the offense under Todd Monken, but they need to be able to run the ball more effectively, no matter what the offense looks like.
Josh, your game was our game of the week last week, I believe, Auburn, Kentucky. What did you think about the way Auburn started it? We thought maybe some potential there for at least a close game, if not maybe a chance at an upset, but Auburn got it done. What do you think about the Tigers?
Yeah, it was pretty close to the start. I think it was only a 2-point game in the fourth quarter. Auburn just started a little slow. I think both teams did really. Kentucky looked like the better offense in the first half, moving the ball down the field. They converted 8 of 10 third downs. They were down on the 1-yard line with a couple seconds left in the first half, looking to take a lead. Roger McCree picked off Terry Wilson, returned it 100 yards for a touchdown. The touchdown was taken off the board for a targeting call, but that kind of swung the whole game. Kentucky stopped converting as much second half, turned the ball over 2 more times, and had a fake punt blown up deep in its own territory, which is not a good idea in hindsight. And Auburn's offense started to get going. Bo Nix and Seth Williams hooked up for 2 touchdowns, and Bo Nix hit Eli Stove for a third. So it wasn't a great start early in the game, but Auburn, you started to see some of the things that Auburn wanted to see with the offense under Chad Morris, which was a very efficient Bo Nix, throwing for 233 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the defense did what it has done under Kevin Steele for now 5 seasons. That's limit their opponent and force a couple of turnovers.
Let's start taking a spin through the games here. South Carolina, Florida. Marc, I'm going to come to you for your analysis of this one. Gators looked awfully good in week 1. What do you think about this matchup between South Carolina and Florida?
Muschamp and the Gamecocks, you don't really want to start 0-2, and you have a new offensive coordinator, some excitement brought in with Mike Bobo, and just some weird kind of off-field distractions this week. Some video clip posted with Muschamp looking like he's having some fun on his TV show, dropping an F-bomb and answering a question, kind of getting in a little combative thing with the media there. But Florida, jumped Georgia in the polls this week. Kind of start that people, that voted in the SEC media poll that had Florida ahead of Georgia. They looked like, maybe they knew something was going on there. So if South Carolina wants to, be a factor and kind of change the narrative on the Will Muschamp era, I think this is the week to do it. And the Gators certainly can carry some momentum, with a back-to-back wins to open the season.
Tyler, I want to look at the Ole Miss and Kentucky game next. I thought both those teams did some good things in week 1, and who do you think is going to have the advantage in this matchup?
Josh talked about Kentucky playing well early on in that Auburn game, and I think Kentucky's the better football team. Ole Miss's defense, there's just too many question marks there. I think that was the second game in a row at home, obviously the other game going back to last year, in which they put 50 or more points at home, and that's not good. Look, Lane Kiffin's offense did some really good things. Matt Corral actually had a really efficient day and throwing for nearly 400 yards and some touchdowns. So the offense isn't the question with Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin going in there and taking over a really talented roster with Corral, Elijah Moore, and some of those running backs and receivers that they have. But if you're going to give up 50 points, especially in the SEC, you're probably not going to win too many of those games. Kentucky's offense isn't going to do what Kyle Trask did in throwing for 6 touchdowns. But Terry Wilson's a very capable guy. He's still trying to come back from that injury. And as he gets more confidence, I think Kentucky's going to be a pretty good team, and that probably starts this week.
Texas A&M's close win against Vanderbilt, and now this week they get Alabama. Any chance the Aggies give Alabama a scare?
I mean, it's always possible, but it's hard to be confident after seeing Texas A&M, like you said, really not play very well against Vanderbilt, and I think win by only 5 points in the end. Like we talked about, I just don't know if I see it with them yet. I want to see it before I start believing it. And Alabama looked like we all thought Alabama would. It wasn't a great opponent in Missouri, but it put up a lot of points. Mac Jones looked pretty good. Jalen Waddle is a problem for opposing defenses. So, could Texas A&M put it all together and give Alabama a challenge? I think it's possible. I think this season, anything is possible. You look back at week 1, saw Mississippi State go to LSU, and I don't think anyone would have predicted that going in. So I think anything is possible, but I don't see it with Texas A&M yet, and I think Alabama is probably going to do what Alabama usually does in these games and just roll over them.
And the game I'll be at on Saturday, Missouri will play at Tennessee. I thought Tennessee was kind of a mixed bag in their opener. The wide receivers played really well, and a chance to now go 2-0 against Missouri. Missouri made it a little more respectable there late against Alabama. Mark, I'm going to go to you for some more thoughts on this one.
Tennessee had an impressive, win on the road against South Carolina. Not necessarily impressive in terms of the final score, but still a road win and a chance to go 2-0 against Missouri and come to Georgia the week after with.
Tyler, Mississippi State looks to keep the good times going this weekend. Arkansas coming to town.
This is an Arkansas team that Mississippi State has hung up 50-plus points on in the last 2 years, and that was with Joe Moorhead's offense. So you just wonder what Mike Leach could do to Arkansas. But obviously Arkansas has a new coach as well and played really well against Georgia in that first half, as Marc said. So this is the kind of traditional trap game, if you will, for Mississippi State. I mean, you just beat the national champs in their own house. Now you come back for your own season opener at home, or home opener, and everyone's expecting you to do big things, especially given the opponent. So for Mike Leach and company, it's really about looking like they did against LSU, outside of 4 turnovers, which is a lot. They still scored 44 points with those 4 turnovers. So if Mississippi State plays a clean game and they move the ball the way they did against LSU, I really don't think it matters what happens on the other side of the ball. Mississippi State's defense can kind of come back to earth and maybe not get that pressure and give up some deep balls or what have you. But as long as Mississippi State's offense is rolling like it was last weekend, they could win this thing 55-40 if they need to. It's really the Mike Leach show here in Starkville right now, and that's what everyone's looking forward to in week 2.
Josh, LSU's bounce back opportunity comes against Vanderbilt. We discussed that Vanderbilt kept that game close against Texas A&M last week. Did we undervalue Vanderbilt at all? What do you think about this matchup against LSU?
I don't know if we undervalue Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt's not a terrible team. We've seen it play well at times in the past few years, just not as well as everyone else consistently. I think if you're LSU, you're probably pretty thrilled that you get to bounce back from that week 1 loss with Vanderbilt, because it probably, in a year where you're not getting non-conference games or cupcake games, this is probably your best chance to really get a bounce back sort of game. I think we'll see LSU look more like we thought LSU would look this year. I don't think LSU is an elite team in the SEC, and I think week 1 proved it, but I think it's better than it was in that game. I think you'll see a little bit of bounce back for that offense this week, and the defense too, if Stingley can play. I don't see Vanderbilt making LSU go 0-2 or giving them that much of a scare.
And that leaves us with our game of the week, Auburn against Georgia. And Mark and Josh will be on hand for that one, a top 10 matchup. Tyler, I want to get your perspective
Yeah, it's a matchup of two teams that, as Josh and Marc both said, both kind of struggled in the first half of their season openers, and you can chalk that up to the crazy offseason that everyone has had, or just first game nerves in general. But at the end of the day, I think these are two of the more talented teams in the SEC. Lot of talent on both sides of the ball for both teams. But Josh talked a little bit about Bo Nix, and obviously the Georgia quarterback situation is pretty interesting as well. I think it comes down to which guy, which signal caller for either team makes the most plays. It sounds like Bo Nix started to do that late against Kentucky, against a pretty good Kentucky team as well. Auburn is pretty tested in that they got to play Kentucky, and Georgia only won up against Arkansas, obviously. So I'm interested to see if Bo Nix carries that into this game against Georgia, because that Georgia defense is a different animal. And I think it'll be a close game, a competitive game. I probably don't know enough about either team to make a pick on it, but it's definitely the game of the week for a reason, and I think a lot of SEC fans will be interested to see how that one plays out.
So management, I think you need to expect that Stetson Bennett is going to start. I mean, why make a change when things were rolling in the second half for Georgia? But I think, just like in the last game, if the offense isn't moving the ball, JT Daniels is cleared this week. He's expected to be available. So I think he would be the next guy that you'd bring in. And if that change happened, that might be a change for the long term for Georgia. That's the guy that was expected once Jamie Newman opted out to be the guy. Georgia's defense, really 10 points they gave up, very respectable amount of yards and had 3 interceptions. One of them was taken for a pick 6, but it's going to be an interesting matchup with Bo Nix, with Seth Williams, with Schwartz, with Eli Stove. Georgia gave up some big plays. They gave up a 49-yard touchdown pass. Richard LeCount had some busted coverage, and I think Auburn's got a chance to make some plays against Georgia, but that defense is too strong probably. If Georgia doesn't have a lot of self-inflicted wounds, if they can get the ball more in George Pickens' hands, I like Georgia at home. But certainly, Auburn's. It's going to be interesting that they've really come to Georgia since winning here in 2005. They've really sputtered on offense, particularly. They haven't scored a touchdown in the first quarter in any of the last, I think it's 5 games. So, I think with the new offensive coordinator at Auburn, it certainly changes things up. But it's gotten the attention of Georgia's defense and Kirby Smart.
The offensive struggles. I mean, that's to me the story of this rivalry recently in Athens. Auburn has lost 6 straight games there, hasn't won 5, and really has just struggled to score. I mean, looking back the last 2 games there, they scored 10 points the last time and then 7 points 2 years ago. Georgia scored 6 points on offense, and Auburn still couldn't win because they gave a big touchdown that decided the game. So they just have not been able to score there. And the offense, there were signs in week 1 against Kentucky that you thought this offense is going to be better. Bo Nix looked not like a freshman anymore. He looked like a guy in the SEC last week. But that Georgia defense is really, really good. And Kentucky's was pretty good, and Georgia's is better. So that's going to be the key to the game to me. If Auburn can go in and build some momentum on offense and actually score points in Athens for the first time in probably 6 years, I think they'll have a chance to pull off the upset. But there is a reason that Georgia is favored by 7 points at home. That's a very good team. Auburn has not won there in a while. And if the Auburn offense can't get going, that's the game. If you don't score in the SEC, you're not going to win. I am curious to see what effect the crowd will have, because every time Auburn plays there, like Marc said, there's 92,000 people there. It's loud, it's raucous. There's still going to be fans there, but 21,000 sounds a lot less loud than 92,000. So it'll be interesting to see if that plays any effect in this game, which is being played in October for the first time since 1936.
All right, guys, pretty good week of games. We'll be back next week to offer some takeaways and look ahead to week 3.